Still here in Cesnădeia, Romania. My favorite backdrop there behind me, the fortified church of Cesnădeia. And let me get right in what I want to talk about. And I put a title on it. Goes a couple different issues that we talk about here. But basically, it's when was America great? Well, let me tell you. First of all, let me start out with the people that I'm sick of. I'm sick of white supremacists. I'm sick of Black Lives Matter and people of white European descent who allow the Black Lives ideologues to shame them. If you're not racist, you don't own any slaves, then stand up like a man or a woman. You're no better, no worse than any person of any color. You just need to stop it. To my friends of whatever color, this is not about you unless the shoe fits. But it is in response to this incessant demonizing of people with white skin from groups like Black Lives Matter. As it says on the intro to my Facebook page, I don't care what color your skin is. I love you enough to tell you the truth. Black Lives Matter is just as racist as any white supremacy group. They call anyone racist who says all lives matter, which proves that black lives are the only lives they care about. And to be honest with you, they don't care about you, what color your skin is. They're about an ideology. They're a Marxist group. They are backed by a lot of Marxist groups. Most of the money that you contribute to them, very little of it goes to Black Lives Matter. Time they get through paying exorbitant salaries and things like that, and then money going to these climate change people, there's very little left that actually goes to the cause of black people. And you may say, who are you to talk about black people or black culture or anything else to do with black people? Well, first of all, I'm a servant of God. Secondly, I have just as much right as any black or even white liberal person to tell everyone how bad white people are. Believe me, I address the sins of white people way more than I do people of color. President Obama, people talk about President Trump causing all the division. My heart was burdened long before President Trump started running for office. President Obama repeated the often used talking points. I've walked down the sidewalk and heard a white driver lock their car's doors as I passed. I've gotten on an elevator and watched a white woman clutch her purse a little tighter. And some of you get so offended by that. Maybe you should be offended that the driver remembers to lock his car doors because either he, a family member, or a friend had been carjacked by a black man at some point. And maybe you should be offended, not at that woman that clutches her purse a little tighter, but on the elevator when a black man gets on, but at that black man who may have snatched her purse, or that of a family member or a friend at some point. I think that'd be reason enough to, hold on to things a little bit tighter, to lock your doors. And most of us lock the doors a lot of times because we forgot to when anybody approaches towards the car. And we remember it, of any color. Maybe you consider those possibilities. The following may be a little bit rough, but it's true. And there's a saying of people who live in, people who live in glass houses should not throw rocks. You can throw rocks at me. That's all right. But when you start throwing rocks at my house, my country, and a whole race of people, then I might start throwing back. I'm not minimizing the sin of slavery or this country's involvement in it. But black people are not the only ones to be enslaved. I know people try to want to rewrite history and say, well, it's a lie, no other people have ever been enslaved before. That's nonsense. Every culture has experienced it at some point, and practically every culture has practiced it at some point. Black Lives Matters and the supporters don't need to be so self-righteous, as if black people are more virtuous than the evil white man. Let me tell you something that happened a few years ago in this century. Chantal Tissi woke to the sound of pre-dawn gunfire. Soldiers marched into her home carrying machetes and told her exactly what they were going to do. "Today we're going to cut off your arm," one of them said. She feared for her 6-year-old son, the only other person with her in the house. "They cut off my arm," Cece told the UK Independent's Eliza Griswold in 2004. "They cooked it while they were drinking our Mandro traditional beer and ate it with the rest of the beans and rice," she added. "They told me they were going to find my husband and eat his heart." Later, while Cece was in the hospital, soldiers returned to her village. They stormed her mother's house, where Cece's sister Georgette also lived with her own 4 children. "We had a shed and they tore it down to build a fire. They took her food and cooked pieces of Georgette and the children," Cece recalled. "Everyone in the house was killed." None of these people are white. Concerning the slave trade, the slaves captured faced a grim future. Many died, and I left a blank spot there. Many died on the ships during the long voyage, and other blanks, due to disease or lack of food and water. Those who survived were taken to slave markets, where they would stand for hours while buyers inspected them before they were sold at auction. After purchase, slaves would be put to work in various ways. Men were usually assigned to hard manual labor, such as working in quarries or heavy construction, while women were used for housework or in sexual servitude. At night, the slaves were put into prisons that were often hot and overcrowded. In 3 places in the 2 paragraphs above, and a paragraph that is following, you will see a series of 3 periods, and that's in my paperwork here. So I say I left out some words in a few places. Concerning the slave trade, the slaves captured by Barbary pirates faced a grim future. Many died on the ships during the long voyage back to North Africa from places like Ireland and England. However, by far worst fate for a slave was being assigned, there's another blank, a Barbary slave. A man being assigned to a man the oars of galleys. Rowers were shackled where they sat and never allowed to leave. Sleeping, eating, defecation, and urination took place at the seat. Overseers would crack the whip over the bare backs of any slaves considered not to be working hard enough. Yep, you got it. Those were mostly white European slaves. Unfortunately, many blacks in America do not want to hear that anyone else ever in history endured slavery. They deny the history. It is also true that when the Mongols invaded parts of Europe, they slaughtered whole cities, except for the ones they took as slaves, mostly women. Some African Americans and prisoners in the U.S. claim to still be slaves. We won't want to play that game. Let's see who the real slaves are. Who is the slave when people like me, of any color, have to work extra jobs or extra hours to help pay enough taxes to put your kids through college? My white parents were never afforded that privilege. Yeah, I'm a privileged white person. It is the taxpayers who have to work long hours, regardless of skin color, to pay for that prisoner's upkeep, who are the real slaves. Yeah, that's why I was hearing a lot of the prisoners claim they're being used for slave labor. No, they're paying for their upkeep a tiny bit. You and I are paying for the rest of it if you're working and holding a job. Guess what? We've mostly prospered because God gave us the grace to get over it. Many blacks in America have also prospered to a larger degree because they got over what happened 150 years ago and are willing to go on and forgive and forget about it. Bitterness and unforgiveness will always end up hurting the unforgiving person worse than the one they refuse to forgive. Now, if you're, I don't care if you're black or white, whatever color you are, your skin, this is for you. Bitterness and unforgiveness will always end up hurting the unforgiving person worse than the one they refuse to forgive. You need to remember that. I think America was great before, but surely even the left could agree that beginning on January 1st, 1863, America became a great nation when the slaves of the Confederacy were freed. After all, there's still slaves being held in many countries still today. What about when America defeated Hitler, sparing the lives of millions of Jews? Of course, BLM does not care about Jewish lives, only black lives. Countless times America rushed to provide disaster relief to countries around the world, too many times to count. Yes, those things are enough to make us a great country, but we have opened our doors to countless millions fleeing oppression and seeking a better life. However, it is some of the very ones who we gave refuge to who now show how ungrateful and unholy they really are. America was great when it began to send missionaries to take the gospel of Jesus Christ to people and cultures enslaved to sin and misery, even to places where some missionaries were killed and some cannibalized, or their heads used as trophies. Places today where the people and Christianity are thriving. America should have been as great when women were allowed to vote, when again, many nations even today do not permit them to. Depending on perspective, minorities of all people should see America as being great when affirmative action was started. And someone mentioned the Jim Crow laws. When they came to an end, the progression has been continuing. If America was never great, how is it that the oppressed from all over the world have flocked to its shores more than any other country on earth? And yet Americans, those who have directly benefited from its greatness, have the audacity to ask when America was ever great. But understand this, 2 Timothy 3, 1 through 5. But understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty. For people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasures rather than lovers of God, having the appearance of godliness, but denying its power. I hear some blacks make statements about how underprivileged they are as African Americans living in America. Go with me to Africa if I ever get to go again. I've been twice. Tell all the black people of Africa how underprivileged you are. If most of them could see how you live, they would either laugh most of you to scorn or just shake their head. Tell these Ugandan school children how underprivileged you are. That's a picture I took in, I think, the year 2000. They left with those containers to get water and returned over an hour later. So they walked a long distance. And you are underprivileged. While you're at it, tell these African prisoners how bad our prisons are in America. Also taken in the year 2000. The building behind that you see, some of you go to church on Sunday morning shouting the praises and thanking God how He has blessed you. Then on Monday mornings, oh, woe is me. I'm so underprivileged because of those privileged white people. But I suppose these are great prisons where they sleep on the concrete floor of the building that you saw there in the background, with little room to even move, and some are lucky if they even have a blanket. But yeah, we have it so bad here. It's so terrible. Day after day on the news and on social media, we hear about all the evil that the people of white skin do. Anytime a white police officer shoots, injures, or kills a black criminal, we hear how bad all police officers are, and even how racist all white people are. Don't be so proud. God resists the proud and gives grace to the humble. I don't care what color your skin is or what ethnicity, we all have skeletons in our closets. I always hoped I would not have to discuss what follows, but when people want to demonize others, they need to look in the mirror. An article by Paul Raphael, Smithsonian Magazine. Some 50 pygmies of the Baka clan lead me single file through the steaming rainforest in Cameroon. Scrambling across tree trunks over streams, we hike through heavy undergrowth with machetes and cut away vine-like lianas hanging like curtains in our path. After 2 hours, we reach a small clearing beneath a hardwood tree canopy that almost blots out the sky. The Baka clan members begin putting up beehive-shaped huts in the clearing where we will spend the next few days. Suddenly, the pygmies stir. 3 scowling Bantus, brandishing machetes, stride into the clearing. I've seen a lot of people online bragging about how proud they were to be a Bantu, be of the Bantu tribe. I fear that they're bandits common in this lawless place. I'm carrying my money in a bag strung around my neck. The news of strangers travels fast among the Bantu here. Masumbi points out one of them to me. A stocky man with an angry look and in a low voice tells me he is Joseph Bikono, chief of the Bantu village, near where the government has forced the pygmies to live by the roadside. Bikono glares at me and then at the pygmies. Who gave you permission to leave your village? He demands in French, which Masumbi translates. You pygmies belong to me, you know that. And you must always do what I say, not what you want. I own you. Don't ever forget it. It's not a white person. Not a white European. These are people of the Bantu tribe. They're black people. Time and again on this visit, I encountered tales of Bantu prejudice against pygmies. Let me back up. All of us in America, both black and white, know that at one time the Supreme Court ruled that black people were not human. That was a terrible ruling. But for those who use it to condemn those of us today who had nothing to do with it, consider who the guilty party is today. Time and again on this visit, I encountered tales of Bantu prejudice against pygmies, even among the educated. On my first trip to Masipala, I had asked Benvenu if he'd marry a pygmy woman. Never, he growled. I'm not so stupid. They're Bambinga, not truly humans. They have no civilization. Now, this belief that pygmies are less than human is common across equatorial Africa. They are marginalized by the Bantu, says David Greer, an American primatologist who lived with pygmies in the Central African Republic for nearly a decade. Attorney Warren Wright writes this. He's also familiar with them. Cannibalism has reemerged throughout eastern Congo as the last vestiges of colonial influence have been eroded during the war. What? Let me take that in when I read it, when I wrote it, and typed it out. Cannibalism has reemerged through eastern Congo as the last vestiges of colonial influence have been eroded during the war. Wait a minute, I've always heard that the colonial influence was all evil. A year did away with cannibalism. And now that they've got rid of that colonial influence, cannibalism is reemerging. Much of the vast forested area is controlled by the Maya Maya, a loose grouping of tribal militias united by their magical beliefs and taste for human flesh. And look up, if you question me, look up the Pygmy Genocide on WordPress. The persecution, eviction from their lands, enslavement, the consumption of their very bodies by non-pygmy humans, The widespread and long-lasting human rights abuses and crimes against humanity that are perpetrated against the pygmy constitute a genocide. A genocide, like so many others, it is ignored by those whose duty it is to see justice done everywhere. But you have it so bad here in America. The white man has treated you so horribly and still is. Shame on blacks in America who are so selfishly wrapped up in themselves, forever complaining about how underprivileged they are, while totally ignoring the plight of black people in most other parts of the world. But understand this, in the last days there shall come times of difficulty. For people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to the parents, ungrateful, unholy. 2 Timothy 3, 1 and 2. God led the children out of Israel of cruel slavery in Egypt. And at every little difficulty they were saying, oh, that we had stayed back in Egypt. Ungrateful. And when you're ungrateful, it's impossible to be grateful. It's impossible to be thankful at the same time. If there was a day when America began a descent from greatness, it was the day that the wholesale abortion became legal. We took another step down just recently when sexual orientation became protected on equal terms with sex and race. So, depends on what you want to make, what your issue is, that you want to, if it's a one issue thing. And it's not a one issue thing. America's never been perfect. There's not a nation on earth that's ever been perfect. And if you get rid of all the white people on the planet, you're still going to have the same evil, same wickedness, because white people are not the originators of that. Other than the fact that whatever color Adam and Eve were, we came with a wicked heart, and every man does now, since that fall. Doesn't matter what color your skin is. Jeremiah 17:9 says that the heart of man is deceitfully wicked. Who can know it? And some translations say that, translate that as the human heart is, it's sick and it's beyond repair. It cannot be, there's no remedy. The only remedy is a new heart. And Jesus Christ promises that. Jeremiah 24:7 says that God would give us a new heart that we might know Him as Lord. Which tells me that that heart we're born with, that we got from Adam and Eve, descendants from them, we can't know the Lord that way. I'm talking to God's people of any color of skin right now. What's getting ready to face America? I've been calling for some time, months now. Everybody else is talking about, well, not everybody. You got two groups. One group says that Donald Trump's racist, he's white supremacist, it's a fascist. Every bad thing can come about. The nation is going to be ruined by him, and what we saw was the nation prosper then. But as that happened, then I began to see white people, conservatives, and Christians putting all their hope in this man. He's going to lead us into a new utopia type of existence. Especially you see this if you followed Q or the QAnons. That was a big thing. And that was supposed to happen months ago when the COVID-19 started. Oh, well, don't worry about it. This is just all planned as part of the lockdown. While all the arrest, all these wicked people on earth are going to be arrested during the lockdown. And then, well, we started new. I'm still waiting. Somebody lied. Somebody lied. I want to tell you something. You put your hope in a man. Look what's going on in our cities right now. And some of you liberals and some of you who are black are applauding them on. The time is coming when you're going to be wishing. Now, I'm not talking just black. I'm talking about white, black, Hispanic, whatever color your skin is. You're going to be wishing we were back to this place, or maybe a few months before it's over. It's not going to be good. God's getting ready to bring his judgment, not on white America. That's what some of you think. Not on white America. Not on black America. That's what some of the others think. Not in Hispanic America. God's getting ready to bring judgment on America. Not just because of police killings of black people. And spare me with this nonsense about there being a vendetta like out where they're out to exterminate black people. If that were the case, boy, they've done a terrible job at it. I mean, I think there's only 10 black people shot. And I'm not making light of that. I'm making light of it in the sense when you try to use that to say they're trying to exterminate a whole race of people. 10 a year, 20 a year, 50 a year. Are you crazy? I mean, what? I mean, that's so ridiculous. And it's been years now, and time's gone by. Some of you know right off the top of your head, killing down in Florida from Amir Zimmerman. Is that one of them? Trayvon Martin, I think, yeah. When that happened, churches in close to where I live there in North Carolina, black church met. It was in the newspaper, Hickory paper. On big headlines. They've unleashed monsters on us. These white people, they've unleashed monsters on us. They're going to slaughter us all. Over one turns out to be a Hispanic guy killing a black man, but everybody wanted to believe it was a white man. However you want to take it. Well, somebody's still doing a poor job. That's what was going on. Be willing to bet, say, I'm not really a betting man, but that all those people at that church that day that was in all such a tizzy and uproar about these white people going to slaughter all of them, they're probably either still living or they died of natural causes. And if they didn't die of natural causes, it's more likely that they died at the hands of another black man than a white man. We know the statistics. Look at Chicago. We know what's going on. You do too. I'm not down on black people. I'm down on black people who keep trying to shame me and every other white person. If you want to trade stories, if you want to trade horror stories, just keep on. We've got plenty. I've just never chose to share them. But some of my friends, unfortunately, have no problem sharing every incident that a white man ever does, a white policeman especially, and accuse them of all sorts of things, being a white supremacy. There is no systemic racism in this country. Well, let me back up. There is. I have come to the conclusion lately that actually I didn't think there was, but I think there is systemic racism. I applied for jobs before that I couldn't get because they had to be reserved for so many minorities. So I missed out on jobs, good paying jobs with companies like GE and places like that. I've worked sawmill, I've worked heavy construction. Now I've had some good jobs in ministry and other places. I've owned a business for a while. Small, very small, in a small town. My parents were never afforded any help to send their children, any of us, to college, like some others have been recently. So yeah, there's systemic racism. If there's been systemic racism recently, it's been against white people. So don't talk to me about systemic racism. It's just not there. At least not against white people, black people. Like I say, none of these things I ever wanted to say. They're not even in my thoughts until it's getting out of hand. If this is what it takes to silence some of these that's always just constantly think it's okay to down me and a whole race of people because of the color of our skin, then let's talk about all the black crime that's been done against, horrific crimes that black people have done against white people. We'll leave that for another time if it's needed, but I hope it's not needed, because I really don't want to think of those things. I don't want to talk about that. I didn't want to talk about this. Like I say, I've known all these things for a long time, but I've never shared them. So if you want to call a truce, and if you happen to be black, or if you're a white liberal that promotes this nonsense about reparations, I feel like I've made reparations already. Through the taxes I've paid to support different causes, to help people get their kids through college, to help people get jobs, and preferential treatment to get them, and other ways. So Dale Little here in Cesnadilla, Romania. We need just people of God. And we better start, before I go, let me one more time. We better get on our face before God. Now I'm talking about everybody. Because again, as I mentioned a little earlier, God's judgment is coming. Some of you think this is just going to stay in the cities there. It's going to blow over pretty soon. Don't be so sure. I tried to get people, and I was burdened about calling America to repentance when the COVID-19 started. But there was some. I'm not going to say there wasn't any. But a lot of it was superficial, and not very many people really were serious about it. Then they were too busy worrying about, where to start. Who's responsible for it? Well, all of us are. It's our sins God's bringing judgment on. And what we need to do is fall on our face before God and seek His forgiveness. And we need to do it soon. But everybody kind of ignored it. Oh, COVID, it's just man-made. It's blah, 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 blah. It doesn't matter how it's made. God could stop it any time, and he didn't. It's waned off some. But then lockdowns came. And then all the rioting, the burning and the looting in the cities. And I'm telling you again, and all these people, all these false prophets talking about how things were going to be so good in 2020. Look, amazing things were going to happen. President Trump's going to make it happen. And some of them still holding on to that hope. You start putting your hope in a man, God's not going to share his glory. God can call a man to do a job, and it's okay to recognize that. But when you begin to put too much confidence in that man instead of God, you watch out. And that's where we've been. So there's a couple messages here, so ran over time. Dale Little, Cesnădeia, Romania.